I was elbow deep in a trauma patient's chest cavity when my phone started buzzing on the counter across the room. December 22nd, 2024, 11:47 at night. The kind of shift where you lose track of time because everyone apparently decided to have their emergencies simultaneously. My attending barked orders while I worked to clamp a bleeder. When we finally stabilized the patient and I could breathe again, I checked my phone. 7 missed calls from a number I didn't have saved. Then a text from that same number appeared as I stared at the screen. The message read, "Hi Cora, this is your Aunt Bethany. We're having Christmas dinner at Mom and Dad's this year. Would love for you to join us. It's been too long." I stood there, in my bloody scrubs, staring at those words like they were written in a foreign language. Aunt Bethany, my mother's sister, the woman who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. It's been too long. Yeah, 6 years too long. 6 Christmases, 6 Thanksgivings, 6 birthday dinners I wasn't invited to. 6 years of radio silence so complete I sometimes wondered if they remembered I existed. Another text came through while I stood there. Aunt Bethany wrote again, "We'll be gathering around 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The whole family will be there. Your cousins are excited to see you." My cousins, right. Mallory and Paige, who blocked me on every social media platform back in 2019, and my cousin Ryan, who once told me at a family funeral that I was an embarrassment to the family name because I wore the wrong shade of black. I shoved my phone in my locker and went back to work. 3 more traumas came in before my shift ended at 6 a.m. By the time I dragged myself to my apartment in Riverside, the sun was turning the December sky that pale winter gold that makes everything look tired. My apartment was small, a 1-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, and nobody could take that from me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number I did recognize, my grandmother. The text was short. "Cora, please come to Christmas. It would mean so much to have you there." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty apartment. See, here's what you need to understand about my family. They're not just wealthy. They're Pembroke-level wealthy. Old railroad money that got invested in tech at exactly the right moment. The kind of family that has a Wikipedia page and a wing of the art museum downtown named after them. My mother, Caroline, married into it. She was middle class before she met my father, Richard Pembroke III. Yes, the third. I was the mistake, the accident. My older sister, Vivian, came 5 years later, planned, perfect. Everything I wasn't. Growing up, I was always the odd one out. Vivian got piano lessons and horseback riding and summers in the Hamptons. I got shipped off to my maternal grandmother's house in Ohio, the one who died when I was 12. When I graduated high school, I told my parents I wanted to be a doctor. My father actually laughed. He said medicine was for people who needed to work for a living, and Pembrokes didn't need to work. I applied to college anyway. State school, no family money. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. Waited tables, cleaned houses, did overnight shifts at a gas station. My mother told her friends I was finding myself in Europe. The truth was less glamorous. I was in a library at 2 a.m. studying organic chemistry while my feet ached from serving overpriced pasta to people who didn't tip. Medical school was worse. The loans piled up. I lived on ramen and free clinic samples. I didn't get invited to Vivian's engagement party, or her bridal shower, or her wedding. My mother called me once during residency. I was in my 3rd year, working 80-hour weeks. She said Vivian was married now. Wasn't that wonderful? And by the way, did I know I was an embarrassment? Showing up to Grandmother Pembroke's funeral in a borrowed dress? People talked. I hung up on her. That was 2019. 6 years of silence followed. And now, suddenly, I was invited to Christmas. Around noon, I woke up to my phone ringing. This time it was my sister. I stared at Vivian's name on the screen like it might bite me. We hadn't spoken since her wedding. I answered. Vivian's voice came through bright and chipper. Cora! Oh my God, I'm so glad Aunt Bethany got through to you. We've been trying to reach you forever. Forever. Right. I sat up, running a hand through my unwashed hair. My voice came out rough when I replied. What do you want, Vivian? She laughed, that tinkling, practiced laugh she learned at cotillion when we were kids. Vivian said, I want my sister at Christmas. Is that so wrong? We're family, Cora. I know things have been complicated, but it's the holidays, fresh start and all that. Fresh start. Like 6 years of being erased could be fixed with some eggnog and forced pleasantries. I asked the question that was burning in my throat. Why now? There was a pause. Brief, but I caught it. Vivian's voice shifted slightly when she responded. What do you mean, why now? It's Christmas. Don't be difficult. That word, difficult, the word my mother used to describe me my entire childhood. I pressed harder. You haven't called me in 6 years. Neither has Mom or Dad. So I'm asking again, why now? Another pause, longer this time. Then Vivian sighed when she said, Look, Mom saw something about you, an article or interview or something. She realized you actually became a doctor, a real one, at Mercy General. She was impressed. There it was. They didn't want me when I was working 3 jobs and drowning in debt, but now I was Dr. Cora Pembroke, and suddenly that was worth something to them. My voice came out flat when I spoke. So I'm invited because I have MD after my name now. Vivian tried to recover. That's not what I meant. We just didn't realize you'd actually done it. Medical school is hard, Cora. It's impressive. Mom wants to celebrate that with you. Celebrate? 6 years later, after I'd already done the hardest part alone. I should have said no, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe some stupid part of me wanted to see them squirm. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. The thing is, I knew why they really wanted me there. My family lived and breathed on perception. Having a doctor in the family, especially from Mercy General, one of the top trauma centers in the state, that was a bragging point. That was something Mother could drop casually at her charity luncheons. Never mind that she told me I'd never amount to anything. I spent the next 2 days working back-to-back shifts. Christmas Eve arrived, and I still hadn't decided if I was going. Around 1 p.m. on Christmas Eve, another text came through, this time from my father. Richard Pembroke III sent me a message that read, Your mother would like you to attend today. Please don't disappoint her. Don't disappoint her? I typed back fast, like she disappointed me for 6 years? His response came almost immediately. That's in the past. We're family. Act like it. Family. The word felt hollow, but I got dressed anyway. I pulled on a simple black dress, did my makeup minimally because I'd been awake for 26 hours. My hair went up in a simple bun. I looked exactly like what I was, an exhausted ER doctor who barely had time to breathe. The Pembroke estate was in Rosewood Heights, about 40 minutes from my apartment. Sprawling grounds, circular driveway, actual columns on the front porch, old money architecture that screamed, "We've been rich longer than you've been alive." I pulled up at 2:54 p.m. in my beat-up Honda Civic. It looked ridiculous parked between a Tesla and a Mercedes. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. My mother stood there in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. She looked at me for exactly 2 seconds before her smile appeared. Practiced, polished, fake. Mother said, "Cora, you came. How wonderful." She didn't hug me, just stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like pine and vanilla candles and money. Everything was decorated within an inch of its life, white and gold everywhere. Voices drifted from the living room. I followed my mother down the hallway. She didn't ask how I was, didn't ask about my drive, just walked ahead of me like I was a stranger she was forced to tolerate. We entered the living room and the conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. My father stood by the fireplace with a scotch. Vivian sat on the cream sofa next to her husband, Bradley. Aunt Bethany perched in a wingback chair. My cousins, Mallory, Paige, and Ryan, clustered near the windows, and my grandmother, Dorothea Pembroke, sat in the center of it all like a queen holding court. The silence stretched exactly long enough to be uncomfortable. Then my grandmother spoke. "Cora, how nice of you to join us." Nice of me to join them, like I'd been invited all along and just chose not to come. I felt every eye on me, judging, calculating, measuring my worth. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. They weren't happy to see me. They were sizing me up, like I was a new acquisition they were deciding whether to keep. What do you think? Should I have stayed home, or was I right to see what they were really up to? Let me know in the comments, because this family drama is about to get so much worse. My father broke the silence by gesturing to the bar cart. "Get yourself a drink, Cora, we're celebrating." I walked to the bar cart and poured myself a generous glass of wine. My hands were steady. Years of holding scalpels in high-pressure situations taught you control. Vivian patted the sofa cushion beside her. "Come sit with us. I want you to meet Bradley properly. Bradley, this is my sister Cora. She's a doctor." There it was. She's a doctor. Not my sister, just a credential. Bradley extended his hand. He worked in finance. Of course he did. He told me about his portfolio while I sipped wine and wondered what I was doing there. The conversation drifted back to safe topics. Vivian's upcoming trip to Cabo, Mallory's new position at some tech startup her father funded, Ryan's engagement to a girl from another old money family. Nobody asked me anything. Not about my work, not about my life. Nothing. Until my grandmother cleared her throat. Dorothea Pembroke commanded attention without raising her voice. She looked directly at me and said, "So, Cora, emergency medicine. That must be quite demanding." It was a test. The room got quieter. I met her gaze evenly. "It is, but I love it." She tilted her head slightly. "And where did you say you completed your residency?" I didn't say, because nobody asked, but I answered anyway. "Johns Hopkins." A flicker of something crossed her face. Surprise, maybe. My mother's voice cut in. "We're so proud of Cora, working at Mercy General. It's one of the top trauma centers in the region." She said it like she'd been bragging about me for years, like she hadn't told her friends I was in Europe doing nothing when I was actually working myself to death. The conversation continued around me. Plans for New Year's, some big party my parents were hosting, a tradition, apparently, one I'd never been invited to before. Then Aunt Bethany turned to me. "Will you be joining us for New Year's? We'd love to have you there." And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about Christmas. This wasn't about family or fresh starts. This was about New Year's, about their party, about having Dr. Cora Pembroke standing in their living room like a trophy they could show off to their wealthy friends. My voice came out colder than I intended when I replied. "I'll have to check my schedule." My father frowned slightly. "Surely you can take one evening off." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. It was the hospital. Trauma alert. All hands needed. I stood up, setting down my wine glass. "I have to go. Emergency at work." My mother's face tightened. "Can't someone else handle it?" I looked at her, really looked at her. I said, "No, someone's life depends on me being there. Sorry to cut this short." I wasn't sorry, not even a little. I walked toward the door and Vivian called after me, "Think about New Year's. We'll send you the details." I didn't respond, just kept walking. But as I reached the foyer, I heard it, just a snippet of conversation that carried from the living room. My cousin Ryan's voice, low but audible. "Thank God she said yes. Can you imagine if we had to explain why we don't have any doctors in the family at the party?" And then Mallory laughing. "I know, right? Mother was so relieved. She's been stressing about the optics for weeks." The optics. I stood there in the foyer, keys in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. They didn't want me. They wanted what I represented, a prop, a talking point. I drove back to the hospital with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The trauma was bad. Multi-vehicle accident. I worked for 6 straight hours saving lives, while my perfect family probably sat around their perfect tree drinking their perfect wine. When I finally got home, it was almost midnight. Christmas was technically over. I sat on my couch in the dark and made a decision. If they wanted Dr. Cora Pembroke at their New Year's party, they were going to get her, but not the version they expected. The invitation to the New Year's Eve party arrived 3 days later, thick cardstock with gold embossed lettering, the kind of invitation that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I held it in my hands and smiled. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the week between Christmas and New Year's doing something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to old family contacts, people who knew the Pembrokes, people who had watched me get erased from family photos and wondered why. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who noticed. My maternal aunt, Linda, the one from Ohio who wasn't rich enough to matter to my mother's side of the family, told me something interesting over coffee 2 days before New Year's. We met at a small cafe in Riverside, far from anywhere the Pembrokes would ever set foot. Linda stirred her coffee slowly when she said, "Your mother didn't just forget about you, Cora. Someone made sure you stayed forgotten." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Linda hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through old emails and text messages, her face tight with anger. She turned the phone toward me. "Read these." They were messages from my mother to Linda, dated over the past 6 years, dozens of them. One from 2020 read, "Please don't mention Cora at family gatherings. It's easier if we just move forward without bringing up difficult topics." Another from 2022, "If Cora contacts you, please let me know immediately. I need to manage the situation before it affects Vivian's wedding plans." And one from just last year, "Linda, I'm asking you as family, stop encouraging Cora's delusions about medicine. She needs to accept that some paths aren't meant for people like her." People like her. I read through message after message. My mother had systematically contacted every single person in our extended family and told them not to include me, not to invite me, not even to mention my name. She'd erased me on purpose. Linda's voice was quiet when she spoke. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but Caroline threatened to cut me off from the family completely if I reached out. I'm sorry, Cora." I looked up from the phone. "Why? Why would she do this?" Linda sighed. "Because you embarrassed her. Caroline Pembroke doesn't tolerate embarrassment. It's always been about image with her." But there was something else, something Linda wasn't saying. I pressed. "What aren't you telling me?" Linda set down her coffee cup. "Your sister knew. Vivian knew the whole time what your mother was doing. In fact, some of these messages were Vivian's idea. She told your mother having a struggling medical student in the family made her look bad during her engagement, made people ask questions about why the Pembrokes couldn't support all their children." The words hit me like a physical blow. Vivian, my sister, the one who called me 2 weeks ago talking about fresh starts and family. She'd helped orchestrate my erasure. Linda continued, "And now they want you back because you're useful, because Dr. Cora Pembroke from Johns Hopkins looks good on their social resume." Your grandmother has been telling everyone at her bridge club about her granddaughter, the trauma surgeon. They're rewriting history, making it seem like they supported you all along." I sat there in that cafe and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. They didn't just ignore me, they actively worked to keep me isolated. And now they wanted me to show up at their party and play along. I finished my coffee and thanked Linda for her honesty. Then I went home and made some calls of my own. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of night where the air felt sharp in your lungs and the stars looked close enough to touch. I got ready carefully, a deep emerald dress that I bought specifically for this occasion, simple but elegant, my hair down in loose waves, makeup that made me look polished without trying too hard. I looked successful. I drove to the Pembroke estate at 8 p.m. The party was already in full swing. Cars lined the circular driveway. The house glowed with warm light from every window, and I could hear music and laughter drifting across the grounds. My mother answered the door, resplendent in a silver gown. Her smile was wide and welcoming. She said, "Cora, you look lovely. Come in. Everyone's been asking about you." I stepped inside. The house was packed with wealthy people in expensive clothes, holding expensive drinks, the kind of crowd my parents collected like trophies. My mother linked her arm through mine like we were close. She led us through the crowd, introducing me to everyone we passed. Caroline announced brightly to a cluster of older women, "This is my daughter, Dr. Cora Pembroke, emergency medicine at Mercy General. We're so proud of her." The women made appropriate impressed noises. My mother stood beside me, beaming like she'd personally put me through medical school. It was nauseating. We moved through the party like that for 20 minutes, my mother introducing me, taking credit, basking in reflected glory. Because I was waiting. Around 9 p.m., my father clinked a knife against his champagne glass. The room gradually quieted as everyone turned toward him. Richard Pembroke III stood on the small raised platform near the fireplace, commanding attention the way he always did. He began speaking, "Thank you all for joining us tonight as we celebrate the new year. This year, we're especially proud to celebrate a significant achievement in our family. My daughter, Cora, completed her residency at Johns Hopkins and is now practicing emergency medicine at Mercy General." Applause rippled through the room. I stood there, feeling dozens of eyes on me. This was it, the public acknowledgement, the reclaiming of the daughter they'd erased. My father raised his glass. "To Cora and to the Pembroke tradition of excellence." More applause. My mother looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to smile graciously and accept this manufactured moment. Instead, I walked toward the platform. My father's smile faltered as I approached. My mother's face went tight. I took the microphone from my father's hand before anyone could stop me. The room went completely quiet. I looked out at all those faces, all those strangers who thought they knew my family. I started speaking, my voice steady and clear. "Thank you for that introduction, Dad. I appreciate you finally acknowledging my existence. It only took 6 years." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. I continued. "For those of you who don't know, I wasn't actually invited to a single family event for the past 6 years. Not Christmas, not Thanksgiving, not my sister's wedding, nothing. I was systematically excluded from this family because my mother decided that a struggling medical student was an embarrassment to the Pembroke name." My mother's face had gone white. My father reached for the microphone, but I stepped back. I kept talking. My mother sent emails to every family member telling them not to contact me, not to include me, to pretend I didn't exist. And my sister, Vivian, encouraged this. She told our mother that having me around made her look bad during her engagement. Vivian stood near the windows, her face frozen in shock. The room was dead silent now. I looked directly at my mother when I said, "But then something changed, didn't it, Mom? You saw an article about me, realized I'd actually succeeded, realized that Dr. Cora Pembroke looked good on the family resume, so you decided to invite me back. Not because you loved me, not because you were proud of me as your daughter, but because I became useful for your image." Someone in the crowd gasped. I turned to address the room again. This party tonight, this toast, it's not about me. It's about them. It's about my parents being able to tell their wealthy friends that they raised a successful doctor. It's about taking credit for achievements they actively tried to prevent. My father found his voice. "Cora, that's enough." I looked at him. "No, Dad, it's not nearly enough. You told me medicine was for people who needed to work for a living. You laughed when I said I wanted to be a doctor. You let Mom erase me from this family because I embarrassed you. And now you want to celebrate me?" The silence was suffocating. I set the microphone down. "I came here tonight because I wanted you to know something. I don't need your approval. I don't need your pride. I don't need the Pembroke name or the Pembroke money or any of this." I gestured around the room at the expensive decorations, the wealthy guests, the carefully curated image of perfection. My voice didn't shake when I continued. "I built my career alone. I survived medical school alone. I became a doctor alone. Everything I am, I made myself, and you don't get to take credit for that." My mother's eyes were shining with angry tears, but she didn't speak. I looked at my sister, and Viv, I hope your new life built on image and appearances makes you happy because you sacrificed your sister for it. I picked up my purse. "Happy New Year, everyone. Enjoy the party." I walked toward the door. The crowd parted like water, people stepping back to let me through. Nobody tried to stop me. I could hear my mother's voice behind me, high and strained, trying to laugh it off. She's always been dramatic. Too much stress at work, I think. But her voice cracked on the last word. I walked out into the cold night air and didn't look back. My phone started ringing before I even reached my car. I ignored it. Text messages poured in. I deleted them without reading. Let me know in the comments if you think I went too far or if my family got exactly what they deserved. Because honestly, I've never felt lighter. I drove home through empty streets, the city quiet in that strange way it gets on New Year's Eve. When I got back to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch in the dark. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from family members, from my parents, from Vivian. I turned it off completely. Around 11:50 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I almost didn't answer, but something made me get up and look through the peephole. It was my grandmother. I opened the door slowly. Dorothea Pembroke stood in my hallway in her silver evening gown and fur coat, looking completely out of place in my shabby apartment building. She met my eyes. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into my apartment, taking in the small space with a single sweeping glance. Then she turned to face me. Dorothea said quietly, "What you did tonight took courage." I didn't know how to respond to that. She continued, "Your mother and I have very different ideas about what family means. I won't apologize for her because she should do that herself. But I will tell you that I was wrong to stay silent. I knew what Caroline was doing, and I allowed it." She reached into her clutch and pulled out an envelope. Dorothea explained, "This is my personal contact information, my direct number. If you ever need anything, call me. No intermediaries, just you and me." I took the envelope, not sure what to say. My grandmother's voice was firm. "You're right. You built everything yourself. That's more than most Pembrokes can claim. Your grandfather would have been proud of you. I am proud of you." She turned toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Cora, half the people at that party tonight will be calling me tomorrow asking for your contact information, not because of your parents, because of what you said. Courage is rare in our social circle." She left without another word. I stood in my apartment holding that envelope and listening to fireworks pop somewhere in the distance. Midnight, the new year. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. It read, "You never needed the Pembroke name, but if you ever want to use it on your own terms, the choice is yours. Happy New Year. Love, Grandmother." I sat back down on my couch and finally let myself smile. My phone was still off. My family was probably having a meltdown at the estate. My mother's carefully constructed image was in ruins. And I was free. The next morning, I went back to work, back to the ER, back to saving lives and doing what I loved. My coworker, Zara, found me during a break. "Did you really blow up your family's New Year's Eve party in front of like 200 people?" News traveled fast. I sipped my coffee. "I might have." Zara grinned. "You're my hero." That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. The messages were exactly what I expected. Angry texts from my mother, hurt messages from Vivian claiming I'd humiliated her, multiple calls from my father. But there were other messages, too. There was one from Aunt Linda saying she's so proud of me. Then from old family friends I hadn't heard from in years. "We always wondered what happened to you." I deleted my parents' messages without responding. I blocked Vivian's number, and I saved my grandmother's contact in my phone. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from my mother's attorney threatening to sue me for defamation. I sent it to my own lawyer, who laughed and said it would never go anywhere. Truth is an absolute defense. My mother dropped it 2 days later. Vivian tried to reach me through mutual acquaintances, sent messages saying we needed to talk, that I'd misunderstood everything. I didn't respond. My father sent a single email. "You've made your point. This vendetta needs to end." Vendetta, like standing up for myself, was an attack on him. I didn't respond to that either. The Pembroke family New Year's party became something of a legend in their social circle. People talked about it for months, about the doctor daughter who exposed her family's hypocrisy in front of everyone who mattered. Some people thought I was cruel, others thought I was brave. I didn't really care either way. I kept working, kept saving lives, kept building my career on my own terms. And every time someone asked if I regretted what I did, I thought about standing in that foyer on Christmas Eve, hearing my cousins talk about optics and appearances. I thought about 6 years of silence, 6 years of being erased. No, I didn't regret it, not for a single second. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you need. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who only love you when you're useful. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it, and that made all the difference.